Welcome to Inside with Savvy and Sage. I'm Rob, bringing my partner, Chad Tongo. So, Chad, in some of your executive experience in the past, did you ever hire a recruiter to fill a position?
I've been blessed enough to actually work with a recruiting firm in the past, but not hire them to fill a particular role because we've had a rather robust HR department that did the recruiting.
Really?
hmm Internally. But I did put on a tie today, considering that we are meeting with one of the highest performing executive recruiters in the country.
Yeah, the reform. It's people aren't going to believe it when she says what her success rate is. I mean, it's almost unbelievable. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
I
I'm glad I was sitting down when I saw you with your tie on, because if I wasn't sitting down, I probably would have fallen over.
I had you and I were on a call just earlier this morning. I had a sweatshirt on.
Yeah, actually, yeah, sweatshirt or hoodie, right? Which I
Yeah,
just think
it
is
was a hoodie. But first impressions are everything in today's environment. And in case ISS doesn't work out inside Savvy and Sage, I can go to our next guest and see if she can place me to another
yeah.
podcast.
Well, it's always good to have choice. It's always good to have a backup plan.
That's right.
So let's go ahead and bring on Karmae Fahr of the Fahr Group. Karmae Fahr, founder, CEO, president of the Fahr Group. Welcome. We'd like to learn more about real executive recruiting, because I can't tell you that the times and dollars I've spent in my executive career hiring a firm and was not happy. Just not only with the presented candidates, but also you get somebody and then, 60, 90 days in, you're like, this is not working out. And we really relied on it. So you probably hear that a lot, don't you?
My industry has a very bad reputation. So I've kind of heard a little bit of everything from 30 plus years ago. I started in it.
Yeah. So what got you into it originally?
Money.
Okay.
And I was a Christian at that time, but it was like, wow, people can make a lot of money doing this.
Yeah.
So I got a job with one of my best mentors in the industry, and she brought me up in the ranks. I started recruiting people that were in clerical roles and grew up the ranks there with middle management, and decided that, boy, I like working with management a lot, and the movers and shakers in the business, and understanding, what's going on behind the scenes, and being that it's so overused, but trusted advisor, but really being trusted. And so hired a mentor, trainer to take me into the retained world back in '06, and launched the Fahr Group in '07. And the rest is kind of history,
Wow.
except last year, God said, hey, guess what, Karmae? You're going out there for me now, and you're going to ignore the bottom line. And I said, oh, really? How do I do that? He said, I'm not going to tell you. So panic, but I'm like, okay, I got this. God wants me here. It's fine. And I'm still panic because
Yeah.
I'm not writing goals down and updating the business plan. But it's so different going out into the marketplace solely for Christ, and to be a face for him. We do the same work, quite frankly, but we're more intentional about being out there for Christ and honoring God.
Well, I think that's one of the more exciting parts of the faith journey, is when God says something to you, kind of like he said to Moses, and Moses like, wait. We got to have a little more of a schematic. And oh, by the way, I really stink at speaking. I'm not the guy, but you're battling through that. So there's a lot of different tangents here. Let's before we go down the faith component, because I think that is interesting, and there's a lot of that area we can unwind. You started Fahr Group in 2007. That must not have been an easy time to start or was it? Because I mean, everything's cratering. Walk us through that 07, 08, 09 period.
I think I was. I think I just ignored it.
Hmm.
That the world was crashing, and actually, God was good. He gave me 6 months into it. We had our first jobs,
Hmm.
and the one industry that was hiring was leasing and finance because small business could not get loans in a
Yeah.
bank.
Yeah.
So they would, from your micro ticket of a pizza shop getting, their pizza oven, they couldn't get it from the bank anymore, but they could get it from a leasing and finance organization
Right.
on up to mid-market and large ticket like airplanes. But they had to go this route. So these were the organizations who were hiring, and they hired sales leadership. We had a great run in executives. We do vice president leadership through C suite. So it
Okay.
wouldn't be a sole contributor in sales, but someone who's going to build an entire vertical or channel, whatever you want to
Hmm.
call it. And we had great success with that, among other positions, technology, etc. And so that has become sort of the bread and butter of our organization is leasing and finance. But if I can, I will say we are not niched. Most agencies, regardless of the level they place, are niched.
Sure. Yeah.
We do every industry cross country. We work nationally. The other thing that's different about us, Rob and Chad, is that we are not niched by functionality. So that vice president through C-suite role, it could be in finance, technology, HR, legal, operations, etc. And we have a couple of things that make us different. That's different in and of itself, but it's
Yeah.
not earth shattering. What makes us different is that we have filled a different position every time we've been hired, which is odd. And the biggest difference is that we fill 100% of our searches. No
Amazing.
one else does that. Industry standard is 59%. I'm not patting myself on the back. We're very blessed, and I have some of the best people in the industry to make this happen, and God has been good.
Yeah. Well, God is good all the time. 100%. Uh, that's a tough one, right? I mean, that is quite an accomplishment. I will say when you said not niche, because I'm thinking back, and the main reason that we would choose one firm over another is they had let's, for lack of better phraseology, a better bench strength in a particular area versus another firm, right? And
Right.
these people would position themselves as their ear to the streets, right? Of people that have their heads up, because there's a lot of people they're just not going to move. I mean, for whatever reason, they're just not going to move. But
Right.
all of a sudden there's somebody that is pokes their head up and is a great candidate, and unless you're really tight in that industry, you're just never going to know. So I don't know. Is there a secret sauce to how you go about uncovering the people that are popping their head up that normally wouldn't come across someone's radar?
Sure. And let me share with you, we have a database of people, but we don't use it.
Hmm.
So we may eventually like open it up and say, oh, maybe Rod or Chad knows somebody.
Hmm.
And we get referrals. But we go to the marketplace every time we get a position. There's two things we do. And not to sound Christian-esque, but we do pray every time we start
Hmm.
our work in the morning. And God, where do you want us to go? And what companies do you want us to knock on the door? What candidates do you want us to call? And our chief operations officer heads our research, Debbie Garland. She is the best in the business. Debbie can find anyone, anywhere, and has. She joined me in 2011, I think,
Wow.
and has been instrumental in finding folks for us. So it's a secret sauce of God,
Hmm.
God using our talents, us doing hard work. It's never easy. We don't just, oh, we have 3 people for you. And,
Yeah.
but it's hard work. It's intense for the candidates. They follow a very rigorous vetting process with us before they even get to the client. So we're sure of who we're presenting. And so, but Debbie is extraordinary in finding people. And so that's part of our success. The other part is that when we get a job, and I'm just about to do it on Wednesday with a manufacturing company, is we sit down with the entire hiring committee and we map the position, meaning we design it. We have your job description, but that's about this much of what the person needs to bring to the table. I give you 10 people with all the skill set. They're not going to match. They have to match everybody's expectation. They have to match the culture. The candidate's goals, career goals, have to match what the company's going to provide. The company has to feed into the candidates properly for what the candidates are going to want. Nobody wants a job today just for money. I don't care what survey you read and they're out there. Oh, people are moving just for money. Not true. People move because companies pour into them. They care about them. They, in many cases, treat them like family. It looks different and, under every roof, but they care about them and they care about their personal and professional development. That's what makes people stay. I've called people that say, I don't make the most in the industry, but I would never leave this organization.
Yeah.
They treat us that well. They know who we are. They care about us. They constantly pour into our development, our training. So that's what people care about at the end. And they have to have a purpose wherever they go. A company has to be passionate about what they do. They can't say to me, well, we just do this. Excuse me? Who's going to get excited about working there? And I'll tell you something. Sometimes we've looked at their organization and said, you don't just do this. Look at the broad brush of what you really do and how it affects people's lives. And we've done that. For them to go back and have town halls or retention initiatives surrounded by initiatives, I can't talk, surrounded by what this passion is. There's a book I love called God is My CEO, and it's vignettes of industry leaders, various industries who've come in to the organization to turn it around, and it's always retention. There's one organization that was in healthcare, and the author said to the individual in the hospital, she was in janitorial work. And he said, I don't understand. You are always singing. You're always smiling. What's the deal? You've got probably the nastiest job here. And she would clean up the OR. She said, if I don't do my job right, the doctors can't operate correctly and people will die. How powerful is that that organization let her know how she goes up the chain of command. And if she's not there, people are going to die. That's powerful. She's not just cleaning toilets, gang. People could die. It's so important that everybody knows their purpose and their contribution in an organization. And that's when organizations don't keep people.
And that's so good. I come from a larger institution, and oftentimes, and Rob can also attest to it from his end, culture is literally most likely the most important aspect of a business next to a market product fit, right? Without culture, nothing a business doesn't flourish. And so, what I'm hearing here, Rob, is that we will need to contact the Fahr Group for when we, need to fill in C-suite roles here for Virtual HQ.
Of course. It's interesting. Gino Wickman, he's the founder of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and this big blockbuster book, Traction. But he also has a really good book called Rocket Fuel, which is
I have it on the shelf behind me.
Yeah, and it's this Rocket Fuel is this juxtaposition between the visionary, which is generally the founder, CEO of the company that has a great vision that drives everything. But there's this disconnect between what's in the visionary's brain and the rest of the executive team, right? They can't get it out of his brain, his or her brain, number one. Number two, oftentimes visionaries are not very good at delegating. So the point of rocket fuel is that every visionary should have an integrator, someone that comes along and pulls all that stuff out of the visionary's brain and disseminates it to the rest of the leadership group, and then puts in certain levels of accountability. Do you ever come across where you're trying to fill a role and you end up being a counselor, because you're all of a sudden, as you're digging in, you're finding, you know what, there's a lot more going on here besides just filling this position?
Almost all the time.
Oh, okay.
And I don't make decisions for my clients at all. It's their business. They know it better than I do. We've just learned it, and the industry usually. But we see enough of what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes founders, like you've said, nobody can do it better than they can. And there is some truth to that. But there comes a point in time where you have to bring up people behind you to do it better than you do it. And you have to see what your organization gives to these people. So we just did it. One of my partners and I went to an organization in manufacturing. They basically saw what they did as a widget, let's say. Mm-hmm. And literally, this widget saves lives. This widget houses the military. This widget helps repair the transatlantic cable. It's mind-blowing what this widget does, and people don't recognize it as that. So sometimes I'm their cheerleader. Also, Rob, I have to be their cheerleader in the marketplace. I have to attract people to an organization. And so I want everyone in the organization, outside of the organization, and us being excited about them. We will walk away from an organization that's not doing it right.
Yeah, it's interesting. And this takes me back to my executive days that, we were a high flying company, and everybody on the executive team was very smart, very motivated. But we made a really smart decision. Everybody went through strategic coach, which was Dan Sullivan's. He was actually very early in the executive coaching program. But one of the things that he discussed with us is each executive finding your unique talent. What you just said there is that, visionaries, they have all the ideas in their head and they're really good at something they do. We all have a unique talent, but you got to kind of focus on that. And the analogy I used for years is Frank Sinatra when he went to sing at a venue. And I know it's 2024. I'm sorry, I just can't say Taylor Swift because it just doesn't work. But the performer doesn't run speaker wires and they don't test microphones. They come out, they sing, and then they leave. And that's So reason I bring this back. Have you ever had times where it's a great position, but the feedback you're getting from the candidates is, I'd love to be able to have an impact in that company, but I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to, meaning they can be hired into the position, but the word on the street is that the particular leader they're just not going to give them the freedom to be able to do something.
That's why our mapping meeting is so valuable, because we have those individuals in the meeting with the rest of the hiring team. And we ask the hard questions, being kind, because they do believe they do it the best. And in many ways, they do a lot of things the best.
Yeah.
They have the knowledge. But now we need to let others do what you're not doing, do what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so that mapping meeting is very important to us. And when I say we're going to be in there for 3 hours, everybody groans. And usually I'm getting more information than the 3 hours, but I don't tell them that. So we'll go back and ask questions. But it's very important that we can in a very respectful manner, confront them with these issues and be blatant and say, if this is not accurate, we can't fill this. And we do that.
Sure. I'm curious, in today's world, post-COVID, so many people want to work remote. But when you think about executive suite level, I don't know. I mean, it just seems that our company's requiring, you know what, we're going to be paying a lot for this position. Your key in the strategy components of it. No remote. Are you finding that, or are people more flexible?
Generally, not 100%. Generally, people are more flexible. Not in this one case we're taking on. But, so we have to find someone that is fine. And a lot of people like working on site, Rob. They really do.
Yeah.
They just prefer it. But let me give you a case from years ago, back in, must have been '09, but way before COVID and remote. I had an organization say to me, we need to find a leader who is going to build this new division for us. And we've never done this division before, and they have to be on site here in New Jersey. And I said, okay, let's see who we can find. So we go out to the marketplace, and we're not finding people that check all the boxes. So I said, let me just look outside of commutable distance. Okay. So we look at California. I think it was Oregon the person finally was in. And I said, we found the perfect candidate. This individual has this, and this. Want to talk to him? This person's going to work remote. Well, that was unheard of back then.
Yeah,
for the most part. And they ended up hiring the individual. I just spoke to that CEO a couple weeks ago, and he said, you found me the best people, and that person was one of them. And they changed their model for this individual who did gangbusters for them. And that same person, I'll follow it up with another story. That same CEO said, I don't want to hire this person. I just don't want to hire him. I said, now I knew this person was great. I knew this person was going to be great, but I'm not the client. I don't have to live with the decision. But I don't know where I got the bravado, but I said, you're wrong, and you have to hire him. And he did. He said, he's the other best person I ever hired.
Nice.
So I don't think I have that bravado in every case.
Yeah.
But I typically can tell who's going to be very right from our vetting process. I mean, these poor candidates subject themselves to 3 to 5 verbal interviews with us, and a written interview. Then they meet the client. So they go through a lot. I know them well. I'm there with the first interview with the client. So we know these individuals. And, the candidates have all said, I've never gone through anything like that in my life.
Yeah.
But they could see the value.
Karmae, let me ask you, switch topics a little bit in terms of where your organization is from an economic perspective. With regards to technological progressions and the evolutions of technology cycles, are you seeing any sort of trends at all where organizations across multiple different verticals and industries, is what you've mentioned, you're not niche, where you're effectively seeing companies looking for leaders specializing in, VR, AI, all of these, different components that are often talked about now in the technology world, but also in the marketplace altogether?
Not yet, because we haven't dug into those positions. Now, I know they're coming up. They're in our pipeline. And we run across AI all the time that our executives now are becoming certified in. I can't speak tech speak, Chad. You know that.
That's all right. Chad speaks enough tech speak for all of us. So,
and I rely on people like him.
Yeah.
Just curious about the labor market. right? And kind of,
Labor markets,
what's the demand out there?
it's, well, we do upper level, vice president through C-suite. So they're typically asking for certifications now, since it's a new thing. Not really new, but it's really new in the marketplace now. And so we're being asked for certifications. And I learn enough to make me dangerous and call people like Chad. Please, what does this mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Give a list of acronyms that, people are using, throwing around, right?
oh,
yeah.
please. Yeah, please. So
It's
I
never ending. Yeah.
prefer working at the upper stratosphere of tech because they're the strategy people. And I don't have to know what programmers and engineers do. And I couldn't do that kind of placement. I really couldn't.
Yeah.
But
By the
you're
way,
seeing it everywhere, everywhere.
one of my favorite memes is where a father is asking his daughter, what do the letters IDK stand for? And she replies back, I don't know. And he goes, man, nobody knows what this means.
I know that's a good one.
Snap
That's
for a
about
dad joke, Rob.
Yeah.
Dad joke.
right.
That is a dad joke. So,
That's very
yeah.
good. Yeah.
Actually, it's a grandfather joke, but my yeah. Okay. So let's talk about something a little more sensitive, right? And Chad and I have, we're fortunate to be involved in different companies where this stuff comes up a lot. So we're privy to it, but there's going to be people watching this that it's on their mind and they don't know how to navigate it. And that is when it comes in regards to hiring and with consistency to your faith, right?
Mhm.
Because you put the HR hat on, the human resource hat, not to overdo the acronym. So put the human resource hat on. Though these are, you got to tread very carefully about this. So what are some things that, and I'm sure you have these conversations where someone says to you, Karmae, look, we're very faith driven. We're not saying that we have to hire a person of faith, have to hire a Christian, but we need somebody that's kind of consistent with the values. I mean, legally, how do you tread those waters? Sorry for the interruption, but this is our shameless plug that if you like the content, like the interviews, please subscribe. And what else should people do, Chad?
Thumbs up, like, and share on all your social media platforms what we do here.
That was really good visual. People are going to be very impressed with how you coordinated your hands with your mouth. That's great.
Thank you.
Well, and we've been counseled on that by Christian HR consultants. And I think, number one, that's very important. And employment law is always changing. And I don't know who makes up some of the rules. They're just plain silly. But what matters the most, Rob, to give you the broad overview, is that you're consistent. You're going to be consistent with everyone. If you're going to give off for Christian holidays, you're going to give off for Jewish holidays or Muslim holidays. Or you're going to have those floating holidays work for folks. If you're going to allow time for a Bible study on site, everyone's invited. They're not invited, you can have other prayer things on site. So it has to be inclusive. And I think the most important thing is that your employees buy into, respect, honor your values.
Mm.
So you all may not, and the larger organizations you may all not be of the same faith, but we can all be kind. We can all be ethical. We can all have the same values. We can give back to the community. And when these things get tread on, then we need to look at it from an employment perspective, and this person's not honoring who we are. So consistency is the main issue. You can't do one thing for one group and not for another group. And nobody can be forced to be part of something.
Yeah, I remember after the 2000, the internet bubble, it was tough times, right? And we had 1,400 employees in a 10-story building. I think we probably laid off about 300 people. And that holiday season, I'd hired Christmas carolers to come in and just go through all the floors, every floor, just sing Christmas carol. I don't know if I could do that today, right? I don't know if that would be possible to do that. But here's the finer point I wanted to get to, right? is that you have an organization, especially the owner or the C-suite, that are consistent with their commitment and their faith, and they want someone that's along with that. How do you vet that with your candidates to make sure that somebody's just not, and I don't mean to be, so direct with this, but how do you know that a candidate's not just giving you window dressing in order to get in because they want the position?
Yeah. We've honestly been blessed. Now I'll answer your question, but let me say this first. We deal with the executive level that knows they're going to be looked at every which way. Background checks, references, our vetting. Now, that's a faith issue aside, but they're not lying to me. They're just not. Why would you be up for a position and something is wrong on your resume? You have to look at your resume as a legal document. You just do.
Yeah.
So our candidates really are not lying to me. And I can't think of one case that they did, not on the executive level. They're not playing games. They know what they want to contribute and that this company has that. So they can contribute that. They can grow in their career. There's a next step for them if there is a next step. So all of that is being handled honestly. Now, the big thing that helps in I can't ask questions that are direct anymore. So I'm careful. What I do is I'll share. Now, this organization is this, and this is their values. And that prompts a conversation around it. Oh, well, I am too. And when I share, we are a biblically based company. I share that with everybody. They'll say, that's great. I love the Lord too. So people volunteer it, and more so today than ever. I'm very thrilled to hear that because people, I think there's a stat out there that 3 in 10 people go to church today. So you may be the only face of Jesus they see.
Yeah.
And we don't believe in hitting people over the head. We believe in actions. Are we honorable? Are we honest? So in sharing those things, now I'll make a plug for your organization that I wasn't asked to do. But you have a product coming out called, am I right? Ephemeral.
Yeah,
I call it the cone of silence for those get smart people that know. That to me is the biggest thing coming to search. In search, we have to sit down with a client and ask these hard questions. What does it look like from your faith perspective? You have to ask the hard questions because let's say you want someone that is polka dot, and that polka dot has with it some religious meaning. I'm obviously making all this up to make a point. I have to know that's what you want. And now I'm not going to discriminate when I go out into the marketplace at all. But I will find someone that will respect the polka dot and that faith and say, this is how you are aligned.
Right.
And so it's conversations about the values of the client. And then when I say we're biblically based, it always opens, not always, most of the time, opens up a conversation that we can tell the values of people. Plus, we do a lot of behavioral interviewing. What did you do when this happened in your past?
Right.
You can tell people's character. And I run toward every red flag there is. If I hear something that's not quite right, I run toward it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, nobody's perfect, right? And hopefully you actually learn more from your failures than you do your successes. And you bring up an interesting point about ephemeral, right? Which is the genesis for ephemeral from our perspective is liberty is given to us by God, and our constitutional right is that we can have a private conversation, right? So that's what ephemeral is based on. I'm just curious, to this point, when we look at our country in the last 4 years, I mean, it's just the deceleration has been significant. Are you seeing that regarding, again, on the searches, are you seeing a more overt declaration by hiring companies that they actually are more forward facing with their faith in the face of kind of a demoralization of our society? Have you recognized, are you seeing any of that?
I see it mostly with candidates
Oh, really? Okay.
and them telling me, I want to work for this type of a
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
They're very out front, open about what they want to do now. Because the people I talk to have a career behind them and they're
Yeah.
looking for the rest of their career. And they know now what works, what doesn't work. I'm not in it anymore for the paycheck.
Yeah.
Karmae, Karmae's not, and they're not. And so I hear it more for them. Now, the company sizes we deal with is usually 25 million, can go below that, up to 500 million to a billion. The reason we're set in that annual revenue, and can we do any size? Sure, they just have to follow our process.
Sure.
But that size typically does not have a huge human resource department that can handle this type of search. And there's nothing wrong with HR folks. I placed them for a number of years. They're terrific. They just wear lots of different hats and work 24/7. So if we're brought in, we can do this intense search. Where I'm going with this is larger companies buy into ESG and they buy in more to DE&I. Now we're seeing it's in the news so much anymore where companies are backtracking
Yeah.
their DE&I statement. We're not going to do this anymore in our hiring process. And so we're seeing companies more in the news and larger organizations do this and walk away from things that really aren't helpful. I mean, do you want an airline pilot who was chosen because of DE&I rather than on merit?
Yeah.
And they are.
Yeah.
Think about that when you get on a plane.
Right. Yeah.
So
I can see the medium-sized companies that went down that path are because they wanted to be in and cool and so forth. The bigger companies, frankly, I think it's a lever that the shareholders, the majority shareholders are leaning on them, right? So the big
absolutely.
firms that own a big block of their shares, who are, to use the most appropriate current term, woke, I'm sure that CEO or some of the they're getting phone calls and they're saying, look, you need to go down this path because we own 2% of your firm or we own 3%. It's just, I think that's a reality. Whereas the firms you're dealing with don't have that particular pressure, I would assume. So,
Well, and some do, but most don't. Most are privately held
yeah.
or small enough, that everyone is in conversations with the board. But I think JP Morgan was one of the first where the shareholders started sending letters and saying, we need to stop this.
Yeah.
And good for them. So many other companies have walked it back. Tractor Supply was one of the more recent ones. I mean,
Yeah.
it's silly. They don't look at their demographic. Who are they selling to? And not to get into all that, but the big debacle with Bud Light.
Yeah.
Who are they selling to?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just common sense. We don't have common sense today.
Yeah.
That's why you need employment law that's umpteen pages long instead of one page.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So with regards to, again, kind of piggybacking off of the whole DEI movement and seeing the backtrack thereof, I am curious about, you've mentioned purposeful work and these executives specifically are at a point in their careers where they're just looking to be a part of something impactful. Is this something that you foresee from a longevity perspective, an organizational longevity perspective? Is this something you're seeing as a necessity moving forward, where an organization is almost detached from the cultural ebbs and flows of the DEIs and the wokeness and all this stuff, but specifically just focus on impactful, meaningful work? Like, do you foresee this being as almost as a requirement for organizations to I'd say attract top talent?
It's a mixed answer. It's always been there, thankfully. I mean, I remember back in the 90s, law firms in Philadelphia that attracted people were those that from the top down had respectful cultures. And so it's been there all along. What we're seeing a few years back, and maybe 8 years even, Chad, HR was saying, we have to be concerned about retention. We can't just go out and get 10 more people or 30 more people or 5 more people. We have people. So retention initiatives started to get more attention.
Yeah.
Now, is it across the board? Sadly, no. But it is becoming more of a discussion. It's not a foreign discussion that I have with clients. I ask them, what are your retention numbers? What do you attribute that bad number to? What do you attribute that good number to? I'm very interested in retention. As a matter of fact, my chief marketing officer, and I are starting to write a book on onboarding and retention.
Yeah.
It can't be overlooked. If you go through the pains and often the expense of hiring someone like our company to find the right person, aren't you going to try to keep them? And my people don't go anywhere. You mentioned at the beginning of this, Rob, people, 60 days, 90 days. Oh my gosh, we made a mistake. It doesn't happen with my placements. They're there. We give a 100-day guarantee and very often make it longer. My people just aren't going anywhere. So, but everybody has to be on board with what candidates today want. And they want those retention initiatives, whatever it looks like inside that organization. It's becoming much more paramount.
Yeah. I would imagine, from a financial metric perspective, it is incredibly expensive to undergo a turnover, specifically in an executive in a C-suite realm or type of position. I think if I can recall correctly, it takes up to about 50% of your kind of human capital budget for that particular position that you end up losing if there is a specific turnover within a 12-month period. And somewhat just becomes significantly more expensive as you continue to go through the search aspect, because you've got not only the retainment of firms like yours, you go through the investment, the orientation aspect, the investment in that particular vertical being affected from a revenue standpoint, right? Not having a particular leader, and so that's incredible. I think that's something that needs to be noted from your firm's performance, is that not only are you 100% on the placement side, but from a longevity standpoint, your people don't go anywhere. That's incredible. Yeah. So congratulations.
And well, thanks. And to bring up something you just said, 50% is extremely conservative. It will often cost them 1.5 times that salary, whatever that salary is. That's expensive. That's an expensive mistake.
Yeah. That's incredible.
And it doesn't have to happen.
Yeah.
Well, let's land the plane on this advice from you. There's somebody who's never hired a search firm, right? And they don't have an open position, but they're looking at their C-suite and they're like, I got to make a move. I've got to replace that. What's advice that you could give someone, an executive, a CEO, regarding that?
You have to speak to all leadership. If there's a board, involve the board. Find out specifically what's not working, how it's impacting the company from a dollars and cents, but also morale. Morale can cause people to leave more than anything. Mm-hmm. That turnover is going to cost morale. So it's very important you get the right employee. But a lot of talking, a lot of listening in planning. It's more about what's everybody else saying than what am I saying as the CEO. Yeah. What's Rob saying and Chad saying that we need? What's wrong on the floor? the manufacturer's floor. What's wrong there? Go down, meet, talk to everybody. Otherwise, you're going to make the same mistakes. You have to have lots of information to then say, okay, we need to replace this, whatever. And here's why. And you've got to have it all laid out, pros and cons of the person that's been there, what's affecting the organization financially, from morale, from retention. Are they coachable? Please. They have to be coachable. They have to be able to learn in their own position, whether, they're a VP of sales leadership, a SVP of ops, a CFO. They have to be coachable. They have to be able to say, you know what, I didn't do that right. I'm accountable, or I need a coach to become better in this. One time, I have a leadership coaching background, and I was hired to help a CFO be more approachable by staff. And it kind of came down to her looking at them and seeing they were real people with real issues. And somewhere inside of her, she had to have love for them. Now, not everybody wants to be loving, but they have to be kind and respectful. So there's so much that goes into it, Rob. There's not a short answer, but a lot of it is conversations from the floor to the top, and everybody that touches this position, which is usually everybody has to be spoken to. It
Yeah,
can't
Short,
be.
shortcuts, to say the least.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quick story. So most people are familiar with Jim Collins' book, Built to Last and Good to Great. I actually spent 3 days with Jim Collins in Colorado when he was about to release Good to Great. Somebody on his staff saw me speaking at some conference in Finland, and I was using his Built to Last platform of comparing two different companies and so forth. Anyway, he invited about 20 executives all around the world for 3 days to kind of do one last vetting of Good to Great before it was released. And I remember, so I was sitting next to the CEO of the largest bank in Australia, and we were going through the level 5 leadership component, right? And the main characteristic of a level 5 leader is humility. And Collins is going through all this data that points to the successes companies have when they're led by a level 5 humble leader. And we had a lunch break, and this CEO he's really kind of frustrated. I'm like, what's going on? He goes, I've been trained, my executive career, and trained meaning for, in his particular case, he said for the past 15 years, I've been trained to kind of keep an arm's length away from all the employees, to kind of have a little bit of a intimidation factor. And all of that training, my entire persona as the CEO, all that has to change because I have to be more humble, right? And Colin's concept of a level 5 leader is when something goes wrong, they look in the mirror, and when something goes right, they look out the window to find somebody in the organization that they could point to say, this happened because of that person. And so it was a fascinating eye opener for a lot of people in that room, and it certainly makes sense, right? I mean, it does make sense. But well, this is great. I think that I hope that people watching this, especially if they're in the C-suite arena and looking to fill a role, fill a position, or acquire talent, that this helps them connect with you, right? That they can what you're saying resonates to them, to their core. That that Karmae is somebody I can have a conversation with beyond just we need to fill this position. I think that's tremendous, Karmae, and you certainly come across that way. We really appreciate your time and your insight. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks so much. Yeah. And we talk to individuals all the time, whether we're taking a job or not. We want people to go away from our conversations with something useful. It could be a candidate or a client, or a potential client. As long as we can help them in some fashion, that's very important to us, whether we get money or not.
Yeah, no, I think, and frankly, I think God honors that particular posture, right? So he certainly does. So, all right, Karmae Fahr, you're awesome. Thanks for your time. It was good spending it with you, and we look forward to chatting again soon.
Thanks,
Thank you
Karmae.
so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.